I think, a pretty good job in raising these two security divisions. And Pakistan Navy has also, I think, raised a coastal force for the protection and safety security of Gwadar. These are good policies and measures. But I think that we need to be extremely vigilant, because there are forces, there are elements, and I need not elaborate who these forces are, who the lobbies are, which want to, number one, which want to derail CPEC, scuttle CPEC. So you link it with the resurgence in recent months in terrorism and militancy in Pakistan, especially in Balochistan, which is the hub of CPEC, number one. So we have to be extremely vigilant. And we should also be careful and cognizant of the Indian pronouncements, which are becoming pretty frequent now, their claims on Gilgit and Baltistan. So Gilgit and Baltistan is the entry point of CPEC route of KKH. So we have to be vigilant on that count. Third is that I think there is still room, there is always room for improvement in whatever system you evolve. I think there is still a need to streamline our security protocols and more coordination between the center and the provinces. Because without security, it will be extremely difficult for Chinese business community to come and invest into Pakistan. And I join Planning Minister in paying tributes to our Chinese friends who, despite challenges and difficulties, have stayed here and still carrying out, these projects. So, but this is a political commitment at the highest level in China to carry on and implement the signature project of BRI, CPEC. So there is a stake of both sides, China and Pakistan, in this project. And the friendship, what President Xi Jinping says, friendship between Pakistan and China is a strategic choice of its people. So I can go on. I think other panelists are here and like to learn from them and listen to them.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think you've touched on some important points. And in the Q&A session, we would request the audience to ask as many questions, because when you leave this place today, you all should be champions of CPEC. I hope for that. But when the ambassador spoke about the challenges of security and of course the energy, and I know Dr. Nadeem has to leave for China early morning tomorrow, but sir, just allow me to invite Mr. Wang for his remarks, because Mr. Wang has been associated with CPEC and energy sector since it started. Now, as I said, he's working diligently with China Energy as head of China Energy in Pakistan. So, Mr. Wang, you can make your comments here, or you can even go there if you like. It depends on what you're going to say.
It's okay. So first of all, I have to say thank you for inviting me to join this seminar. Yes. So I'm from Energy China, who has deeply engaged the CPEC project for more than 10 years. And Energy China and our subsidiaries, and including China Gazoba, and some other subsidiaries already presented in Pakistan more than 20 years. In Pakistan, we have built a lot of energy projects like Nilum hydropower, Dasu hydropower, and Momanda hydropower. And also on the CPEC, we invested the Suki Canary project. So during this 20 years, we have seen a lot of opportunities in the energy sectors. We have seen big potential of hydro in Pakistan, and also very big potential of wind, solar, and as well the tire core. Yes. In the energy sector, but I just had some friends from Pakistan. They always complain the power tariff is too high because of maybe the secular debt or the power system is old. So because of this high tariff makes industrial product have a high cost and less competitive in the international market. But in my opinion, Pakistan have full capacity to reduce this tariff with your own indigenous resource. Yeah, just I mentioned, you have a huge hydropower resource and renewable resource and tar coal. So how to develop this indigenous resource? So on the CPEC, we have built Kalot hydropower, which is completed last year. And next year, Suki Canary hydropower invested by Energy China is going to start commercial operation very soon. And also another hydropower, Azad Patan hydropower, is also in the pipeline. Yes. So I think once such hydropower project completed, it will improve the structure of the generation sectors and also reduce the tariff. So electricity is not only to give the welfare for the people, but also it's a driving force to the economic. The stable and affordable or cheapest power electricity is very important for the industrial. So we have to try our best to develop such cheapest resource. So Energy China, as top energy contractor and investors, so we are very keen to work with local enterprise to exploit such opportunities and to transfer such potential into reality. So I think in the future, Energy China will have a very huge cooperation space in Pakistan. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it just gave me a chit that, about the speakers who are online. But wonderful. I think you've summed it all on the energy part. And while we will speak on the future of CPEC, where role of Ayla Majid, Sajid and Komodo Bilal will be important as far as the blue economy. I think all this platform was set by your long-term plan that you articulated, Dr. Nadeem, and I as part of your team, when we were working on the long-term plan, I still remember the late night oil that we burned, and also the challenges that came from the media and the push that we had. So if you could just highlight, and I think some of the youngsters here, because by 2030, where your long-term plan takes us, I think it's important for them to understand what, because they keep asking me as a professor in the university, what is there for us, what is, and the kind of narrative being built politically perhaps. So I would just request Dr. Nadeem for telling us the pillars of the long-term plan, and perhaps how does it relates to the youth sitting here.
Okay. Thank you, Hassan Daud. I think, as you already highlighted, that we burn our lot of midnight oil while preparing this document. And it was like, I mean, you name anything, there is, I mean, almost covered in that. It took a lot of effort, but unfortunately, as Ambassador Khalid Masood said, that from the very beginning, all the initiatives which were being taken under the CPEC, those were made controversial. Similarly, the same thing happened with the long-term plan as well. That from the day one, I mean, there was a lot of negativity in the media, a lot of negative articles were being written that the China is going to take over Pakistan. They are going to, I mean, take our agricultural lands. They are talking about, I mean, having their own agricultural firms which will be operating from Pakistan. The dairy sector would also be in their control and stuff like that. So it was, for us, there was the challenge was two-pronged. The first of all make this document very inclusive, so that at least to foresee our needs up till 2030, and then document them in such a way that there must be some kind of a binding on both governments to take or to make investments into these particular sectors which are going to be highlighted in this document. And then the second challenge was concomitantly to deal with this propaganda that was going on, and for that we need, at that time we hired the team of 45 freelancers. We asked them to rebut. These are the kind of stories which are not there in the public. The two very important stories I would like to share with you. The first one is this: over where we engaged these writers, we asked them that anywhere in the world, anything that is being written about CPEC and that is negative, these guys were responsible to rebut that in the same medium. Okay, and early in the morning, roughly, in 9:30, we are going to have the first briefing in the ministry, including minister, that what has been published or asked on the international media last night regarding the CPEC. And then the team has been there, team was there who was responsible to respond to that. That's how we were catering that, and particularly the major problem was coming from KP government. And it was very unfortunate that every time we were there, Daud will vouch for me, and we had a meeting with the CM KP. He was so happy and so relaxed that, okay, you solved my problem, and you are saying whatsoever we are saying, he was trusting us. But hardly Islamabad bhi enter nahi ho rahe hote the, so sometimes minister is going to call that, have you watched the TV, and KP chief minister is again having a press conference and is again talking against me, talking against the CPEC. What have you guys done over there? So then it was really kind of a surprise for us that what's happening over there. Then I asked the chief secretary in KP that please do let us know that who is the advisor of the CM on CPEC. Then he shared one name. We asked our agencies to evaluate him and who is this guy, from where he came. And to your surprise, it was also kind of a surprise for us. Do you believe that this guy who was an advisor on CPEC to CMKP, he was a neurosurgeon by profession. Okay, and then the rest I can't reveal here. And then that's how we fixed him, and then automatically the rest of the things get smoothened in that regard. And then later on there was no problem from KP side. All those issues which Ambassador Saab has highlighted regarding the routes, those were almost settled, because at that time the focus was, and this is what we were telling them, the major propaganda was that why the central route, and this is only because the PMLN government is in the office and they want to have clear access to the major cities of the Punjab, and CPEC is not all about this, but the Chinese demand was to have the western route first. And to this extent, this information was correct, that the Chinese were interested in the western route first. But then it was our view that if we are going to focus on western route, then it would be a transport corridor, not an economic corridor. And what is the difference between the two? Transport corridor is the shortest possible distance between the two locations. But economic corridor is the one, that's the transport corridor, if it has livelihoods around it, okay, and those, populous areas are feeding into the kind of flow of goods, flow of, people from one location to another location, then it is an economic corridor. So we were more interested to have this one first, so that industrial cooperation, the kind of important milestone that was also the part of the CPEC 1+5 framework, 1+4 framework, so that the kind of deindustrialization that was happening in Pakistan, we can address that. And then another very important aspect was that there was a lot of problem while the long-term plan was conceived, that why all these deals which we have with China are not going to be made public. We were, first of all, there was a concern of the China that we are having the similar investments in 60 other countries, which are the part of the BRI. So if you are going to make all these details project-wise, these details would be available in the public domain, then it would be very problematic for us to deal with the other countries, because every country has a different risk profiling, every country has a different, you could say that level of interest, and Chinese level of interest was also very different for different countries. So they said that we have a kind of very concessional deals with Pakistan, and we don't want to have this public, this information in public. And very rightly so, and I used to say this, that whenever people criticize that the CPEC deals were the worst deals, or they were very expensive deals, I used to say that the yardstick is, if you go for IADA loan, that is the most cheapest loan of the World Bank, okay, and you compare the $16.4 billion which we had for infrastructure development in Pakistan from China, so then the weighted average interest rate was 2.38%. This interest rate is even lower than this IADA loan. Okay, but we were bound, we can't make it public at that time, but this number I used to say at that time, and we calculated this, we asked the minister to highlight this, to negate this negative kind of perception and propaganda that was going against CPEC, that this is the best deal any country could have in this world. I mean, who lends you $16 billion on 2.38%? Is not possible. But the problem was these loans had a kind of a certain grace period, and after completion of that grace period, their outflow from Pakistan side was supposed to start, and that was going to start from June 2022 onward. So accordingly, then we had the inflows mapping, outflows mapping, and the only two vulnerable spots in this chart were 2018 and then 2022, or where, in 18, because $13 billion worth of investments in energy sector were causing a lot of stress on our import bill, and eventually, but at that time this import bill was being managed by the Chinese side, because the dollars, the RMB or the dollars were flowing and it was getting settled. But then there was a component which was also the responsibility of the government of Pakistan to chip in at that time. So, but unfortunately our export proceeds and remittances were not good enough to take care of that, and at that time we were in need of certain support from the multilateral agencies as well. So at that time, then IMF and all these were putting pressure that why we should lend you, if you have to repay certain amount to China, and if these deals which you have finalized with Chinese counterparts, and if certain balance of payment issues are arising from that, then it's a kind of a bilateral issue and you need to resolve it. And for that, once again, China helped us a lot at that time. We arranged $1 billion worth of currency swap arrangement, just to have a other buffer or a cushion, that if God forbid something bad happens and we are not able to fulfill these obligations, So then we are going to have an arrangement over where the Chinese are going to accept the Pakistani currency and we are going to accept the RMB, and then this swap arrangement could settle certain kind of transactions which were needed at that time. But 22 was a very clearly highlighted spot over where if our exports were not supposed to increase by 10-12%, we were not been able to settle our payments in 2022. So keeping in view this problem in 13, 14, 15, in the long-term plan we kept all the safeguards which were going to make this possible, that how we will be increasing our exports, how we will be making sure that industrialization is going to kickstart in the country, and all these 7 zones, including the Rashakai, as Ambassador said, that it has the highest level of completion right now. The physical progress, yesterday we had the review meeting, it has 35% completion rate. You could imagine that if the government, the way we were pursuing it in 16, 17, it would have been completed by 2020. And these 2 years, there must have been certain industry which were quite willing to come to Pakistan. And a few days ago, we had a meeting with the Chinese embassy officials, and the guy who is our commercial attaché here, he has been posted from Vietnam to Pakistan. And he was telling that during last 2 years, 340 businesses he has helped to move from China to Vietnam. Okay? And this is, the same would have been happening in Pakistan if these industrial zones would have been in place. And I don't think so that today the kind of problem we faced having this deal with IMF, having these issues in our current account deficit would have been there. If all those parameters which were there in this long-term plan would have been followed, all those milestones would have been achieved on time. I think these challenges are there because during the last 4 years, 4.5 years in the previous government's time, everything was put on the back burner. That was the serious challenge, and I think I just arrived quite late, but Minister was highlighting this issue at that time.
Yes, and I know that you have a flight to catch, but I'll still insist that you stay a little longer, because I'm sure there will be a lot of questions targeted towards you in terms of how they're planning. But now let me move to Ayla Majid, the champion of green transition, energy green transition in Pakistan. And Ayla, while you would speak on the projects, I just would like to highlight that even in CPEC, the transition and the energy sector started with the Jhimpir corridor and also looking at renewables. And again now, as Mr. Wang said, the transition is about to happen. So could you just speak on that and share with us your vision, how CPEC should move forward in the energy sector?
Yes, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. I really would have liked to say good morning, but we are very late in the day. Yes, so since the last 2 hours, a lot of this discussion has revolved around not wasting time, and we have wasted a lot of time in the implementation of CPEC because of various external and internal factors. I think the value of time everybody should really appreciate, because your time, my time, every time is really valuable. So with that thought, I will just take about less than 5 minutes just to sort of give you and show you that what is that we can do in future in terms of various areas of or various key pillars of CPEC. So as per various estimates, Pakistan's economy would and should grow by a considerable factor leading up to 2030. And if it grows with a growth rate of plus 6%, we can roughly touch a base of about $40 billion. we also need to look at, and I'll link that with why we need to look at greening CPEC or looking at bringing in sustainability there. We all understand that Pakistan is one of the most climate impacted country. And in terms of the loss that we have undertaken because of not having climate resilient infrastructure and not having the adequate measures, the risk mitigation strategies, as well as also not having the policy readiness. Because of that, we have lost about probably dozens of billions of dollars already. It is actually, unfortunately, a very abysmal number that we have in terms of Pakistan's per capita GDP and the purchasing power. Every individual in this country, coming from any strata of the society, has been impacted because of various reasons, whether it has been the climate challenges, whether it has been the social challenges or economic challenges. Now, with this background, what is very important to look at that, what can we do in terms of bringing sustainability and green practices in CPEC? I would I will not talk about too much about the projects in detail because a lot of sort of road has been built since this morning. Discussion about various very key projects in various sectors that have happened. However, I would highlight 5 different sort of key pillars that are there. Infrastructure, of course, we have Gwadar, the ports are there. And the SEZs there are there too. What do we need to do over there? We need to pivot our ports, our infrastructure, our SEZs towards green economy, towards low carbon economy, and also feeding what the globe needs. And I will come to that. Then in terms of energy, yes, energy, Pakistan has been an energy insecure country. We still are, because we rely a lot on imported fuels, whether it is LNG, whether it is coal, whether it is any other fuels. And obviously, with regards to the affordability, the country, of course, cannot afford imported energy. So we need to look at indigenization. And for indigenization, clean energy is absolutely the best source. The region where we are located has one of the highest solar irradiance. In terms of the wind potential, just the Jampir and Garo corridor has about plus 50,000 megawatts. And these are studies from 2006. And obviously, a lot of potential has still not been exploited in the overall clean energy mix or in the energy mix. We are still under 5% on-grid clean energy. So there's a lot of room that that is there in terms of in terms to add value. And I think in the clean energy, we should not only be looking at just wind, solar, but we should be looking at bringing in battery technology to Pakistan. China is the leader there. In terms of whether it is providing for energy, clean energy supply chain, which includes from solar panels to cells to batteries to newer technologies, even in terms of, say, other sort of industrial technology, which could also help us accelerate our clean energy. So I'll now come to technology in particular. And I was in a session during COVID time with our current ambassador to China, and we were talking about that, how can we possibly bring chip making to Pakistan? Now, obviously, there are many, many chip makers around the world, but some of you may know, and if you don't, you should. There's a very interesting sort of number to look at, that there are smaller, very, very crucial minerals that are required for chip making. And in some cases, like gallium and many others, China has about 84 to 90% share of those minerals. Let's look at that. How can we sort of link our mineral sector, their technology, chip making, accelerating to clean energy? That is extremely, extremely crucial. So mineral also has a linkage here. We have a great project that has been signed, agreed, and the feasibility of the project taking place. There are a lot of other potential projects around the mineral sector, which are very critical to the industrial as well as clean energy supply chain. Now, let's talk about transport. Transport is also a very important sector of the CPEC, and also how it impacts the global sort of industry and the global landscape as well. Gwadar can pivot itself being the e-fuel provider of the globe. So I think that's one thought that we need to look at. Globally, many countries, many industries, they have committed to reducing GHG emissions as well as decarbonizing those sectors. The aviation sector has an estimation of about 2.5% of the global emissions. The shipping sector about 3%, and why a lot of these big, say, vessel carriers, they are not investing in those so most sustainable vessels or most sustainable ships, and leading up to more sustainable fuel aircraft, because there is a concern that there's not enough fuel production. Now with pivoting Gwadar and sort of the rest of the country where we are placed, we should look at producing biofuels, e-fuels, e-ammonia, e-methanol, many others. And let me give you a number that the global e-fuel market by 2031 will be about $14.3 billion. We should definitely look at that. How can we play some role there? Also, let's talk about the resources. The globe has finite resources. Whether we like it or we don't, the globe has finite resources. And with the global population that will be about 9.6 billion in 2050, there is an existential crisis. There will not be enough materials, there will not be enough food. So let's look at resource extraction. Resource extraction and processing leads to 90% of global biodiversity loss, and at the same time, the future industries will not have enough raw materials. Even as we speak now, the clean energy industry globally cannot go at 3 or 4 times the speed because there's not enough materials in the supply chain. So rather than looking at the linear model of production, which is extract, make, use, and dispose, the model should be extract, use, recycle, and reuse. So I think the circular model of economy, the circular economy principles should be applied to how we are developing projects under CPEC. There's absolutely no doubt that CPEC is a great project for not only our region and our country, but for the rest of the world as well. It has great opportunities. However, we need to rethink, and we need to see perhaps that the time that certain projects were not implemented, we should look at now that how can we bring in these additional considerations which were not there pre-COVID, which were not there 3-4 years ago, and probably not as fundamental to us as they are now. So looking at all of those and going forward, what are the things that we need to do in order to greening CPEC? The key nodes are, of course, energy transition, enabling sustainable businesses, and enhancing digital and emerging sustainable technologies. When we are building infrastructure, we should look at building sustainable infrastructure, invest in sustainable agriculture, because food security, of course, before we export, it is very important for our country. Unfortunately, we import billions of dollars of wheat. And then, of course, sustainability leading to employment. I think skill building and employment for our country is extremely important. And of course, impact assessment of all that needs to be done. And all of this to be supported by sustainable finance. HBL is a partner to this event, and HBL, the financial sector, has a huge role to play. So in a sense, what needs to be done is sustainable economic development and growth. There needs to be value creation, there needs to be skill building, there should be focus on innovation as well as indigenization. And whatever model that we undertake, it should be inclusive. Partners from Pakistan, the Pakistani private sector should be included. And they should also be given information about where they can sort of come in and what is the significant role that they can play. And I think there was a mention, somebody mentioned about the Chinese media ambassador. I believe you mentioned about that a lot of people rely on reading what is coming out for Western media. China has some great resources. I personally, whenever I've liked to sort of read one of the China's leading English newspaper, China Daily, what it says is absolutely enlightening. It talks about what China is doing in terms of addressing future industries, etc. Just 2 weeks ago, there was a major event of the World Economic Forum, the annual meeting of new champions that took place in China at post-COVID, from pre-COVID to post-COVID. It's the first time it has happened, and a lot of that discourse has revolved around future technologies as well as decarbonization. So I believe it is absolutely fundamental that when we are talking about CPEC and all these key pillars under CPEC, we must, it is absolute must that we apply the decarbonization and sustainability lens on that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I know, I mean, whatever you've spoken is important, especially for the young generation, because the huge possibilities and opportunities that they have, a lot of jobs are being offered around green transition, and perhaps some of this could, Dr. Nadeem could take to China and in your discussion that following week. But the other challenge that we've had is on the cross-cultural issue, and I'm glad that we have Sanders here, who's been the champion of globalization and addressing the cross-cultural issue. So without further ado, Sanders, the stage is yours.
Excellencies, Federal Minister, Ambassador, Honorable Rector Bahria, NIMA delegates, distinguished guests and faculty, students, Ni hao ma, assalamu alaikum. It is truly my privilege, but also a profound pleasure to listen to the panelists in the auditorium I know so well. And I thank you for such high-level information. My field and my participation would be people-to-people connection within CPEC. This very month I celebrate Pakistan's hospitality, also exactly for 10 years, just like CPEC. And next to that, I've also been working in China as a dean of a business school in the Harbin, the Heilongjiang province, beautiful place. In those two capacities, I've been teaching Pakistani and Chinese students. And in my own little experience, their communication skills, their mindset, their expectations are very, very different, which is great news for a teacher. But people to people, I was also able to bring a larger group of Chinese students here to Bahria, Islamabad campus, for my yearly summer school, where I provide, together with my colleagues at Bahria, a crash course in international skills. Ladies and gentlemen, much of what we do, of what we think, and how we judge the others, be that Pakistani, Chinese, Chinese, Pakistani, actually is programmed in our young minds. From our second year until our 12th year mostly, we have all kind of deeper values. And scientists for about 30 years now have been identifying and validating, I would say, 65 deeper cultural value systems. And it's some of my fellow countrymen actually who have mapped these values and discovered that there is a lot of national average scores. And in that sense, we are able to kind of predict a Pakistani, whether that's all the way from Naran or from Karachi. I know it's a very big country, and China is even bigger. But actually, there are predictable, deeper Chinese or deeper Pakistani value scores. And if we can predict it, we're able to manage it. And that is very interesting. Myself, I've been studying and researching international team skills, cross-cultural leadership, also in variety of areas in China and in Pakistan for the last 15 years. And my main conclusion basically would be those who fail to prepare to fail. I am a very strong believer in country-specific preparation and education. And I want to give you an example of Europe, where I'm from. One sec. Yeah. Because my first job actually was working in Brussels for the European Commission for external trade. And I can tell you that the lot of the communication, what you expect of people you're in a meeting room or in project with, it is a cultural soup which is unpredictable at times. And it took me more than a year and a half to make some sense of it, and I never have been educated in that way. I had to learn it through falling and standing up again, and that was not the easiest process in my life. But it's actually something that you can. In Europe, this is a reality for us, and you have to realize that the European Union or its predecessors was built after a devastating, self-mutilating Second World War, and the European leaders at that time sat together and said, this never again. And as a result, we started with tariffs and trades, but after a short while we actually realized that culture and language is also very much part of the output and the success. And I refer to the wonderful words of former Ambassador Masoud Khalid, who referred to the psyche and the cultural expectations and sometimes cultural clashes or cultural crashes. Those are not his words, but that is what science teaches us. So yeah, what we see, and when I was working in Brussels, all of a sudden I remember that I got a copy of the so-called Elucidate report on my desk. And this was clearly stating that on average 40% of all pan-European projects were failing. And the major cause of the failure was actually intercultural misunderstanding. That is a very high number, and of course something needed to happen. And the response in Brussels was the curricula, prescribing cultural studies, specific skill sets that work in the European Union context, and also more European languages in the curricula. And any first-year student at this moment doing an international business, or they actually have several courses in intercultural or these kind of applied skills that matter in the people-to-people context. If you listen to CPEC at the moment, a lot of it is still infrastructural. It's about the investment, the FDIs, the this, the that. And those are, of course, that is the hard connectivity. It all starts with that. But the people-to-people, the soft connectivity, as I like to call it, is, I feel, very, very important. What we have done besides the curricula in Europe is also the foundation of a student mobility program, which is called Erasmus+. It's 1/3 of a million exchange students per year who live in 6 months or 2 semesters in another EU member state. Erasmus+ works very, very well. And this is the logo. But if we go back to CPEC, if in Europe we have a failure rate of 40%, how about the Sino-Pakistani projects? Do you think not 40% will fail? Where and when are your young graduates trained for this people-to-people interaction on a professional, applied business or project level? So I was thinking, if we in Europe can have Erasmus+, why Pakistan and China cannot have an Iqbal Plus program. And whether you see this China PEC mobility program suggestion, if it carries the name of Allama Mohammed Iqbal or that of our Chief Guest Minister, Professor Ehsan Iqbal, I fully leave to your discretion. But the fact is that it is interesting. Now, recently I've been able to read this book, China as Number One. It certainly is in my life in recent years, and of Ambassador retired Syed Hassan Javed. Interesting book. And in his final chapter 8, he states, Pakistan's universities urgently need to introduce China studies. And now I ask you, and also in the back of my mind what previous panelists and speakers have been saying about the dominance of Western media, in academia it's no different. How can Western textbooks, and it's a bit awkward me as a Westerner saying this, but I deeply feel this, how can Western textbook prepare a student in Islamabad, Karachi or Lahore for an all-Asian affair? And that is what surprises me. And I feel that, markets move faster than curricula. And I think Pakistan at this moment needs something else. It's not a generic intercultural theory book. I think it's hands-on, work floor ready, applied knowledge. So what I would propose as a Westerner would be, of course, is like leading PAC Chinese teams or Chinese PAC teams. Maybe this is a course that universities in China could develop in the Belt Road. And I say so because my former job was being a dean of the Belt Road Business School in Harbin, and I really believe in leaving my own Western heritage. I think there should be courses like CPEC project management. Maybe the students in Pakistan desperately need to understand Alipay, WeChat Pay, and they should do so for PAC SMEs. I think we need to understand the mobile commerce. Stop talking about e-commerce, because in China it's m-commerce. And in the People's Republic of China, this is where the chances lie for PAC export, people, companies, and I feel therefore you need to study the opportunities that the People's Republic offer. So there is a lot of things, and maybe even we should study Thai consumer behavior or even Australian market research, and I get to that later.
So Sanders, I would just interject. One of the cultural issues is of the understanding, and in Pakistan today is Juma, and and that is at 1:45. So due to the paucity of time, I would just request you to give your concluding remarks, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think why is it that good PAC universities copy entire curricula from Britain? I think the days of Lord Mountbatten and the dominion of Pakistan are long gone. What I would like to say is that RCEP is enormous, and it's only 3 weeks ago that the last that it really got into place with the Philippine signature. So what I would like to suggest is hard connectivity is important, but what about soft connectivity? I think global is Asian is another way of spelling globalization. Calibrate the curricula at an academic level, chances are loading, and time's there, and I would like to say shukriya bahat.
Sanders, I would say बहुत shukriya and shesheni. With this, I would now move to another futuristic aspect of resilient transformation and infrastructure development, where Sajid, your role has been pivotal. You've written a lot on this. You've even written a lot on BRI when it all started, and I remember that document traveling across China. So with this, I would just request you to succinctly just highlight the importance of infrastructure, resilient infrastructure development under CPEC.
Thank you. I think I'll invite first everybody to the very basic question. There's always two sides of the equation, and we are looking only at one, that what we can get from China, how we can get more investment. There are 500 million people from a middle class who just moved to middle class in China, and they need stuff, and they are importing stuff. Are we thinking about it, what we can export? Right? It's a two-way street. So the infrastructure which is coming from China to Pakistan, it's going from Pakistan to China as well. That's a one market which we have to start looking at. China normally work in a very sympathetic way with Pakistan, so it may not imply the same regulation which Europe or US has applied on our product or service categories. And we were talking about resilience, we were talking about sustainability and ESG side. Right now, China is the second largest emitter for the carbon dioxide or equivalent of that. So carbon emission is one of a key issue. That's been they have got a biggest industry which need a talent to help them to move towards sustainability practices. They don't have there. They have a very strict regulation, but given the number of businesses out there, they cannot produce that kind of talent at the pace which is required, and that's the biggest risk for China because they are the biggest exporter and the largest share in a global trade. With the overall regulation coming all over the places, these are the kind of services and this is the kind of talent we have to start looking at. And luckily, BRI itself has a BRI Green Development Initiative. They have got their own standard for their inbound and outbound investment, that how that need to be evaluated. Again, the missing link is talent. Other part, 500 million people moving toward middle class, their habits are changing. They are going for international products. They are looking for food. They are going for beyond the basic needs. They are getting into the more luxurious life. They need food. Like Minister Saab said, food, fruits, anything which we can produce and we can send. And that's bring us back to the very basic thing in this equation, the productivity. If we have to compete or even export something, we have to produce that. So agriculture is the first thing where we have to start looking at, can we get enough support to learn and implement the practices which China did and create that resilient infrastructure and the supply chain for agriculture where we have got 30% wastage, can we really reduce those wastage? And these small things and a very focused agriculture investments and the knowledge sharing, not only money, but actually putting the right kind of regulation, resolving the 18th Amendment issue, the federal versus provincial one, who need to intervene, how the land use regulations should be applied, and how we can preserve our agricultural land and use it for the higher productivity, learning from China, not only their money, but the knowledge. That's where it is. Second part, if we compare the labor productivity, Mr. Saab was saying the labor intensive industry will be moving to Pakistan because our labor is cheap. That's not true. Our labor is expensive than China because of the productivity difference. So even a higher paid Chinese unskilled labor is basically we better off by having a cheap labor here, because we have to deploy 3 or 4 people to do the same thing, which a one person can do it in China. So we have to understand that productivity gap, but that's where the opportunity is. Just improving a little bit on the productivity, how it's going to impact our overall GDP. So if we look at the data of last 20 years, the productivity, labor productivity of China has improved 388%. In Pakistan, it's improved 32%. So just learning, and productivity is about the behavior and skill. So it's not only skill, it's also the behavior and attitude. Just improving from that 32% to 64%, we are still way behind, but just look at the impact on the economy by just increasing that kind of productivity. Where we can learn, right now the best is China. Mining, that's a very underinvestment in Pakistan if we talk about mining. And it's a high value area where we can do the mining, convert into the high value product and get into the exports. And we are still exporting a lot of minerals and the materials, but not with the processing, because again, investments and the learning side of it. So if I look from a resilient infrastructure or resilient economy, for me it starts with the very sustainable, resilient agriculture infrastructure, working with China, not for their money, for their knowledge. Second, the skill and education. They offer a lot of scholarships, and their universities are in the top ranking. But we are not seeing many students in Pakistan using that scholarship, spending 2 to 3 years there, learning from them and adopting their work habits. I wouldn't use the word ethics, but work habits, that how they really build their day and how they really improve every second day in terms of their productivity. So they are obsessed with the productivity. That's the one thing which they don't compromise. The trade and the productivity are the key terms which they are using. And then bringing them to the mining side. And then start looking into the equation. It works both ways. They have got population which has a need. We got population which has a need. And we can fulfill that. We have to literally get out of that mindset that there will be somebody else which will come and really help us. And I'm going to close it on one example, and very recently from Vietnam, by the way. I was in Vietnam. I went to a roadside restaurant. It's a fish restaurant. I ate my food, a dinner, and I tried to offer them a tip. The person who was serving me, because I was not speaking Vietnamese, so there's a girl who came up and then really peeled off all the shrimps and stuff, and she helped me there. And I was trying to give the tips. I forced her, and then the honor came in. We don't take tips in Vietnam. Full stop. And I think that's what we have to bring as a mindset at the roadside restaurant. As a population, we are not looking for a tip, we are looking for a trade. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I've served in Vietnam and I can echo what you're saying. So thank you very much for highlighting this important point. But the other issue that we have had in the sustainability of our special economic zone, where I think we have Dr. Chang with us. She's done extensive research on China, its SEZ development, but also on Pakistan. So right away to you, Dr. Chang.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Hassan. I'm really honored to be part of today's discussion. So I also prepared some PowerPoint slides. Please allow me to just share my screen. So yes, like Dr. Hassan said, today I hope you are able to see my PowerPoints well.
Yeah, we can see it. We can see it.
Okay.
Keep running in the same format.
Okay, good. So today I would like to contribute to our discussion by addressing the issue of industrial cooperation under the CPEC, in particular the issue of special economic zone development. Since I've done research about China's development cooperation, not just in Pakistan, but also elsewhere, such as Africa, I wish to also draw some lessons from these places and hopefully can provide some food for thought for what could be done differently in Pakistan. So first of all, let me put out a slightly provocative idea, which is that we probably need to decenter the discussion about industrial cooperation in the CPEC away from SEZs for a while. It seems to me that so far the discourse on the CPEC industrial cooperation has entirely focused on the SEZs, where the progress of industrial cooperation is measured just by the development of the zones, how many companies have registered, how many companies have invested, things like that. And just now we also heard numbers about the completion rate of the Rashakai. Of course, which was a good achievement, but it seems we need to broaden our understanding of what industrial cooperation involves beyond the SEZ development. Because even though SEZ, as we all understand, it's a catalyst for industrialization, SEZs themselves cannot be a substitute for the broader industrial policy. And if we keep talking about SEZs without thinking about what role they play within a broader industrial policy, it will be like focusing on the trees without seeing the forest. So there has been a lot of expectations on the part of China to relocate its industries to Pakistan. But let's not forget there are many countries in the world where Chinese industries can potentially be relocated to. We have talked a lot about Vietnam and countries like that. And as you can see in this map, today there are over 100 overseas zones developed by Chinese companies in 46 countries across the world. And there are still many more, because these over 100 just are the larger ones that are being monitored by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. There are many, many more invested by Chinese private companies, which have been operating kind of under the radar, but many of them are nevertheless thriving. In fact, some of these smaller zones might be doing better than many of the larger SEZs, because these smaller zones are driven by the immediate needs of the private investors. So this is to say that simply by building SEZs under the CPEC framework does not mean that investments will come, and there's a lot of competition around the world. So what do I mean by having an industrial policy strategy before SEZs? Perhaps let me provide an example which I think offers some very constructive lessons, which is the Ethiopian case. So this chart on the right, as you see, shows Ethiopia's exports, and you see that it has enjoyed very strong growth of exports since 2016. So what happened then, because Ethiopia adopted an SEZ-based industrialization strategy in 2014 and 15, which involved developing around 15 industrial parks in the country. And by 2016, the first industrial park, Hawassa, which was highlighted here, was already up and running, and it started exporting immediately. So to repeat, the Ethiopian government took only 1 year to set up its first flagship industrial park, which immediately put Ethiopia on the global map as an exporter. And so you might ask, if China played a role in helping Ethiopia setting up this industrial park. The answer is yes and no. The park was not funded by China, but rather through Ethiopia's own issuance of bonds. And the construction of the park was contracted to the Chinese company CPEC, much similar to the way Rashakai was contracted. But in that way, Rashakai was also kind of funded by the Chinese, but it was contracted and constructed by the Chinese company. And this company, of course, was credited for completing the construction within 9 months. But other than that, the park is developed and run by Ethiopia's own Industrial Park Development Corporation, IPDC, which is a state-owned enterprise set up specifically to manage Ethiopia's industrial parks. And prior to setting up all these parks, the Ethiopian government conducted a very thorough study of SEZ experiences around the world in several countries, primarily in China, which laid the foundation of its industrial park-based industrialization strategy. In fact, even though the Ethiopian government hired a team of Chinese experts to help design their industrial park strategy program, they rejected several Chinese ideas because they did not quite fit the local context. And this leads to the key lesson, which I think can be drawn from the Ethiopian experience. The host country needs to be in the driving seat in developing an industrial policy, and based on which they can draw resources from China and use such resources to its best benefits. And such agency is reflected in Ethiopian government's proactive learning. As I mentioned before, 2014, they conducted a very thorough study, and there was also a lot of debates within the government before they finally reached an SEZ-based development strategy. They also clearly identified a sector-based approach to boost their exports, including the textile industry and the shoemaking industry. And the government made very specific efforts to target foreign companies in these sectors to invest in Ethiopia. And very importantly, the government of Ethiopia demonstrated strong commitment to foreign investors, and they carried this through. Let me elaborate on this last point, again, by referring to the Hawassa Industrial Park. The Ethiopian government did not develop the park first and then hope for the investors to come. which is probably the case with many CPEC SEZs, or actually many SEZs China developed in many other countries. In fact, Ethiopia already secured the interest of a major investor, which is the American garment giant PVH, and this is a company that owns such brands as Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein, and so on. And so they already secured the interest of this investor before they embarked on the park development. And PVH was convinced to invest in Ethiopia exactly because the company's executives were impressed by Ethiopian government officials' commitment to work with foreign investors during their trip to several East African countries. And during this trip, Ethiopia stood out in terms of the government's cooperative attitude. And later on, the Ethiopian government also proved their commitment by delivering the park within 9 months, and thanks to some very dedicated government officials. And having PVH on board means that they are taking with them to Ethiopia their suppliers from all over the world. And having such a global brand company to invest in Ethiopia also helps providing the publicity and visibility of Ethiopia to other international companies. And very importantly, PVH was also very deeply involved in the design of the park so that it could best suit the needs of the manufacturers in the textile and garment sectors. And it is particularly worth mentioning that one request from PVH, the company, that the Ethiopian government accommodated was that to adopt the state-of-art zero liquid discharge facilities in the park, meaning that the park would not be discharging waste to nearby lakes. And it was quite commendable that for the Ethiopian government to be willing to invest in this expensive technology. Of course, it's not cheap, as they had a vision to become the next generation industrial park, which actually puts them ahead of the industrial parks around the world, even including Chinese parks in China. And another thing to mention was that the park's location.
Chan, could you go to your last slide of recommendations, because just my apologies, but
yes,
due to the paucity of time. Yeah.
Okay, that's just my last slide. My very humble recommendations to offer for the CPEC Industrial Corporation. First, I think instead of focusing on specific SEZs, more discussions need to take place to develop export-oriented industrialization strategy, which the SEZs can then be embedded in. And second, compared to countries like Ethiopia, of course, Pakistan has a better industrial foundation, and many Pakistani firms are already plugged in the global supply chains. It would be advisable to consult these private sector leaders for their opinions about what is needed for better integrating Pakistan into a global export landscape. And finally, in order to convince international investors, the government would need to demonstrate their commitment and ability to follow through, and be it with regard to provision of infrastructure or to provide stable policy environment for the business to operate. So with that, I conclude, and I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chang. I just want to highlight one thing then, that when Professor Lin Yifu came to Pakistan in 2017, with his model of structural economics, and Dr. Nadeem would remember that. He traveled across Pakistan demonstrating what you're saying, and when the government changed here, he then went to Ethiopia, and the story is in front of you. So still we're trying to bring in Professor Lin Yifu to Pakistan. Our last speaker would be speaking on one of the most important aspects of CPEC, that is the Maritime Security Corporation. Commodore Bilal has been writing on this, has been advocating sustainable growth around blue economy. So sir, the floor is yours. Please, ladies and gentlemen, for your information, the Jummah prayers here today are at 1415. So we will have some cushion for question and answers.
Okay. Thank you very much for including me in this panel discussion. Let me first acknowledge that I am sitting in the informed audience, so I will be running through because of the paucity of time. Once we talk of maritime's component of CPEC, I'm more focused on the maritime. I divide the CPEC project in 3 phases. One is the land project, which connects the China up to the Gwadar port. and then some economic zones and IPP projects and etc. etc. Second is the port itself. Port operations, port development is the second part of the CPEC. And third is the connectivity of the Gwadar port with the rest of the world. Until and unless that component, that the connectivity of the port is fully developed or fully operational, I think, I personally assume that we will not be able to harvest the actual true benefits of the CPEC. Because CPEC, up till now, what we have been doing is we have been developing some land projects. And mind it, all those nations who have focused on the development of the lands only, look at the history of last 2,000 years or 3,000 years. All land-oriented nations ultimately perish. Only those nations who prevail at sea ultimately dominate the world. Be it the Americans, the Britishers, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the Muslim empires of the old times, Mughals, the great empire vanished just because of the 350 sailors landing on the Calcutta beach. So this is the impact of the sea component. Until and unless we understand the importance of Gwadar connecting to the rest of the world. Mind it, now coming back to the Gwadar port. Gwadar port is destined to handle 400 to 500 million tons of cargo once it is fully operational. But it requires about 60 plus berths. And berths, that too with 18 to 19 meter drafts. Our competitive ports, the Dakkan port of the Oman, the Slala port, Jabali Ali, they all have 18 meters plus depth available. They can accommodate aircraft carriers for the repair and maintenance. All these ports have logistic agreements with China, America, India. All three major countries of the area, they have commercial agreements to operate in those ports. We are not taking off. The Gwadar port has 3 berths since 2007. Unfortunately, the machinery installed on the Gwadar port in 2007 ultimately perished because of the just rust, because it was not used, and then we had to replace it in last 3-4 years. All cranes, etc. have been replaced. These factors, this Gwadar port development is like you are developing an airport but without a runway. So your aircraft will not land, but you have a very good infrastructure outside. Until unless you focus the development of Gwadar port, and then we will be able to connect with the Middle East through these Dakkan port, Salalah, Jabali Ali, through Djibouti, Ethiopia, Nigeria, with the African continent, Sri Lanka, Far East. Gwadar port will act as a pivot to the rest of the world. That is why we call the Gwadar port the jewel in the crown of the CPEC. Until as you understand the jewel, and the jewel should shine, I think we are really feeling the heat. Secondly, once we are talking of the Indian Ocean, once the shipping, bringing those 400 to 500 million tons, you need a shipping. Unfortunately, Pakistan is having only 13 ships with lift capacity less than 10% of our own cargo. We are wasting $8 billion annually on the foreign shipping, the freight charges. And we are begging for $1 billion to IMF. We need, the problem with this is that our policies, that is 2002 National Maritime Policy, has not been adjusted according to the 2023 or 2020. Even CPEC has not been able to brought in the changes in the National Maritime Policy. That is an old vintage policy. Our shipping policy, absolutely old, year 2000, we have extended that policy to in 2020 for next 10 years. That policy has not yielded one private ship in Pakistan inventory, and we have still extended that life of that policy to another 10 years. These are the things which we need to focus, how to benefit from the true potential of the CPEC. And CPEC will only take off, the revenues will only be generated once the Gwadar port operates. We are basically connecting the north-south corridor is now, mashallah, very good, very in good hands, and it is progressing. But I think east-west corridor along the coast, Karachi port should be connected with the Gwadar, like with the Port Qasim, Karachi, Gwadar, and maybe Iranian ports of Chabahar and Jask. These 5 ports should be connected with each other. Because no single port, no single berth can handle all types of cargo. The berths are designed for a particular type of cargo. So we cannot construct the 60 berths in next 5-10 years. So we will be having the cargo available, but not the berths available. So, and secondly, the benefits of the CPEC should also be shared with the Karachi port and the Port Qasim also. So this, I think these number of ports on Pakistani coast must all have interconnectivity on the road as well as at sea. There may be some feeder ships running between them. So these are the things which we need to bring incorporate in the CPEC projects, maybe under Chinese plans or not. Thirdly, the most important thing, now we should bring back the Pakistan-China shipping lines coming into play. Because if we start it today, it may materialize maybe after 10 years. But we will need those shipping lines operating, Pakistani-China flag carriers operating jointly in the Indian Ocean. That will take the cargo, and that will be the freight charges will also be benefited to these two countries. So look at those aspects of the maritime security. This is the important, and our planners, mashallah, the chief economist is sitting here. So I think we can send some recommendation on this subject to you also.
Right, so thank you very much. And on the revenue part and on the taxes part, the Chinese enterprises have paid around 1.8 billion US dollars, and also a revenue of around 1.9 billion US dollars have been generated from CPEC projects alone. So that's good way. Our agriculture has grown by 50% in this 10 period. Our sesame seed export have grown by 40%. Our rice export has gone up to by 1 million tons just last year. And a lot of good headline stories, but I would now move to the question answer session. We have paucity of time. I am allowed only 2 questions. The housekeeping part would be, A is that no suggestion, just a question, let the panelist answer you, and the other part request would be that you introduce yourself before asking this question. So a former member of Planning Commission is also here, so we'll request him. Can you please give him the...
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Zubair. I'm former member Planning Commission of Pakistan, currently working as a prorector at Namal University. I was also the CEO of Lahore Knowledge Park. These are very fascinating debates, and we have always been involved in the strategic level debates. But for me, I would like to ask maybe the chief economist or maybe the member governance there. The true challenge that we are facing at the moment is translating this strategy into some execution on ground. Unfortunately, the execution structure in Pakistan is, to say the least, not working. One great indication of this, the latest introduction of this investment council headed by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and second 2 tiers have also been included in that. We have to do something as soon as possible to improve our governance structure. Otherwise, this will all remain a plain talk. Thank you very much.
Another question. Dean has the priority. He is my boss also, so I do not have a choice. So.
Dr. Thank you for being such kind always. I'm Dr. Naveed, the Dean of Bahria Business School. My flight is coming to the Chief Economist. Don't you think much remain uncaptured towards the capital markets? If I see the potential of the capital markets that associates with the development side of the CPEC. So this is one of the area. Sheer initiatives you're speaking high about that we have the initiatives towards the swaps of the currency. But the economic turmoil that we are facing right now, this is more on the side of the volatility of the prices, volatility of the commodities, volatility of the, I would say, the forex as well. From that point of view, the derivative markets is one of the segment of the capital markets that plays the role as, I would say, the hedges, where we have the risk management of all the volatilities. So I think this is one of the area, if we are going to merge the capital markets at the level of the risk management as well, at the level of the, I would say, the economic inclusion. So I feel this synchronization of the CPEC with the capital markets, it's going to strengthen you. So your sheer thoughts how we can put this way forward towards the policy side.
Sir, आप भी sir Misbah, if you like to ask a question, आपके साथ जो नहीं पीछे आप sir. So, and if it's towards the chief economist, that's the reason I asked you to stay back.
No, not the chief economist. I am generally going to speak on the CPEC itself. Its past, its present and future. उस लिहाज से आपने देखें, सबसे पहले तो अगर अच्छा होता आप डिस्क्राइब करते CPEC है क्या, कौन से रूट्स हैं. ऑल रूट्स ऑफ कोर्स आर हेडिंग टुवर्ड्स ग्वादर. सेंट्रल रूट कौन सा है, ईस्टर्न रूट कौन सा है, वेस्टर्न रूट कौन सा है, उसको डिस्क्राइब करते, उसके टाइमलाइन बताते हैं कि इस टाइम पे इतने % कंप्लीट वो होना था, आज हम इधर खड़े हैं, इतने % कंप्लीट हो गया, इतने नहीं हुआ. ठीक है, ये तो आज डिस्क्राइब करते हैं ना. फ्यूचर की अगर बात करें, बिकॉज टाइम नहीं है तो मैं ज़्यादा एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन मैं आपको एक रियलिस्टिक वो फीलर देना चाह रहा हूँ कि आप कह रहे हैं कि इसके साथ ये होता रहा है कि 1 स्टेप फॉरवर्ड 3 स्टेप बैकवर्ड ये होता रहा है, 4 साल में कुछ भी नहीं हुआ. इसके नेगेटिव इन्फ्लुएंसर बहुत हैं, नाम भी नहीं हम लेते. इंडिया का नाम लिया तो इधर एक स्पीकर ने कहा जी और भी इन्फ्लुएंशियल कंट्रीज़ हैं, अमेरिका हो सकता है, तो नाम लेने में क्या हर्ज है. अभी देखिए ये 4 साल जो आपने कहा है, पॉलिटिकल स्पीच तो की आप मिनिस्टर साहब ने, बट देयर वाज क्वाइट सब्सटेंस इन दैट. हम फिजिकली देखते भी रहे हैं कि ऐसा ही होता रहा है. अभी रोमांटिकली हम उसको 4 साल को हाइब्रिड रिजीम कहते थे. उसका एक कंपोनेंट तो अभी भी सराउंड विद मोर डोमिनेंस, विद मोर पावर, विद मोर अथॉरिटी. सो व्हाट आर वी गोइंग टू डू विद द CPEC. अच्छा, आखिरी बात, बाबर प्रॉब्ली पूरे सेमिनार ने ही स्पोक द बेस्ट. ही सेड जी सारे रूट आपके हेड कर रहे हैं ग्वादर को, ग्वादर हेड ही नहीं बन रहा. उसकी कैपेसिटी कितनी है, ग्वादर में बस कितनी है, वो उन्होंने सी के ऊपर सिक्योरिटी की बात की है कि मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी विल कम लेटर. पहले तो ग्वादर की ऑपरेशनलाइजेशन होनी चाहिए. उसकी जितनी हम रूट्स उधर लेके जा रहे हैं, चाइना से सामान आए या मिडल ईस्ट से आए, तेल आए और वो उधर जाए, उसकी कैपेसिटी तो हो ना.
Right, very good.
Thank you.
I would also request last question from any of the youngster, and when I say youngster, it means anyone below the age of 25. I would not accept any youngster from this group. So anyone below the age of 25, and I know if there is any.
San, we have this.
So anyway.
This in front.
Yeah, go ahead. And be succinct as possible, please.
Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon everyone, honorable panelist. Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Thank you very much for giving the chance to ask my question. All of the speakers went very well through their discourse of speaking about the CPEC, but what I really appreciate, including Dr. Hassan Daud, but also you, but what I would really appreciate is Dr. Chang's presentation, who really focused on the special economic zones. So keeping in view, thank you Director General, National Institute of Maritime Affairs, for conducting this conference at Bahria University, since I'm a graduate of myself over here. So when we are talking about the promotion, prosperity and growth amidst challenges for the CPEC, how do you see the utilization of the special economic zones and the students for the cultural exchange between China and Pakistan? So if you can put highlight, I would be thankful, sir. Thank you.
Brilliant. I would request Chief Economist to answer all the questions, and the remaining I would request Ambassador Masood Khalid to give your concluding remarks also, and perhaps the remaining ones you could answer. We have a university-to-university alliance with China. We had this in 2017. We had this in 18. A lot of activity. It's headquartered in Shanghai. We will discuss this perhaps by the other speaker, Dr. Nadeem.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with the last question first, and then, but there was something which I think pertains to Khalid Saab. He will properly, respond to that. So I think, first of all, why we haven't talked about what is CPEC, I think it was not the subject. The subject was challenges, and we think, since is a 10 years old story, everybody knows about it, all the literature is there, website of the CPEC Secretariat is there. I don't think so that makes sense to talk about what is eastern, western routes. There's a long debate that was there. But coming back to your Gwadar point, I think Gwadar, if you just Google and try to at least look at the CPEC Secretariat website, so there a hospital, the Vocational Training Institute, a new airport, all these things are well in place. Last time I sent the delegation who just evaluated, we are going to have the Safe City project for the Gwadar. Then Prime Minister was about to inaugurate the airport last month, but had some certain, other constraints due to which we couldn't manage that, and hopefully very soon that inauguration is in place. And when we are talking about why we are talking about these last 4 years which we lost, it's really very heart-wrenching when we look at the kind of effort we put in during the last 5 years, and after the regime change, how the next government just took it just like a kind of a piece of rubbish thing and just throw it away. Just let me give you an example. 300 MGDF desalination plant, 300 megawatt coal-based power plant, and then dredging. Okay, these were the top priorities, but unfortunately the previous regime didn't pay a single day any attention on these things. And 3 months ago we specifically had a special grant approval by the Prime Minister, and we provided 6.8 billion rupees for dredging. Could you imagine? The port is there, but the dredging, which is a regular activity at the port, that was not performed during the last 4 years. And because of that, what was the problem? All the kind of, honorable panelist has highlighted that the big ships, they cannot arrive. And the only benefit of the Gwadar port is it's a deep sea port. But if siltation is going on and there is no mechanism to remove that, it's not going to work. Where were the authorities at that time? Because there was no attention to these details. So that's why we are the minister and everyone is repenting on this, that how we sabotage the whole project. All those early harvest projects were contribute to the economic growth. The few other things which were supposed to be in place, those are not there. So now once again I'm coming back to the now first question, the governance issue. Just do
also the capital market.
Yeah, I will come back to that. So governance is also linked with this. If a government is in office, the government's job is to perform its function. Government's job is not to do somebody else's function. So if the previous 4 years whole government set up, and I know, because I was the first one who left government after the change of the regime, because my resign was not accepted at that time. I was told that after the transition you can leave. So then the Prime Minister took the oath. The next 2-3 days we had the presentations. I gave a presentation on economy, another presentation on the CPEC. And I told all these things, that these are the important things which are in the pipeline, and we need to focus on all this. But what happened? Just after giving that presentation, when I and Secretary Planning just came back to our office, Secretary called me, just look at the TV, and when I switched on, and there was this gentleman, Razak Daud, he was having a press conference that all the CPEC projects are going to be stopped for 1 year, and we are going to revisit them. This was the message they conveyed, and then afterwards what happened, I don't want to highlight that. So having this context, if the government is just after कि जी हमने तो corruption खत्म करनी है, corruption खत्म हुई मुल्क से, everyone knows, there is a corruption किस level पे है. Project जब हम approve कर देते हैं, तो we know in the planning commission, everyone knows in the Prime Minister office कि 40% amount development budget की 100 रुपए में से 40 रुपए commissions की मद में जा रहे हैं. Who will fix this problem? Every time I say this, whenever I have an opportunity in any important meeting, I highlight this कि जी आप austerity drive से I highlighted this. We constrained all the ministries on the name of austerity drive because it was an IMF agenda. Ministries के पास एक जरूरी अपना कहीं कोई air condition खराब हो जाए उसको ठीक कराने के पैसे नहीं है, because first they need to get approval by the austerity committee. But on the other side, what's happening? 1000 अगर अभी इस साल का 1000 बिलियन का डेवलपमेंट बजट है, 400 बिलियन कमीशंस में जाएंगे. Everyone knows. Austerity से हम 50 billion भी save नहीं कर सके. These are misplaced priorities. I mean, but who will fix this? I mean, आप कह सकते हैं कि जी हम क्यों नहीं अब fix कर रहे? भाई हम अगर if since last 14 months, if your 60% time is being wasted on how to stay in office, and then only 40% time है जिसमें ये कुछ हम चीजें कर लेते हैं, जिसमें अभी ड्रेजिंग की एग्जांपल भी दी, बहुत सारे और चीजें की हैं. अभी ये माउथ फूड डिजीज का सेंटर जो 2017 में क्रिएट होना था, बिकॉज एट दैट टाइम चाइना हाईलाइटेड कि हमारी मीट की नीड्स मार्केट में बढ़ रही हैं. जब मिडिल इनकम, जैसे सर ने कहा, मिडिल इनकम क्लास बढ़ती है, आपकी फूड कंजम्पशन चेंज हो जाता है, बास्केट चेंज हो जाता है. सो देयर वाज एन 14.8% ग्रोथ इन फूड आइटम्स, and the highest food item that was needed was the meat, and Pakistan was very well placed to export meat. But what was the problem कि हम आज तक अपने माउथ एंड फूड डिजीज के लिए जो वो सेंटर्स हमें बनाने हैं, क्वारंटाइन सेंटर्स, वो नहीं बना सके. किसने बनाने थे? हमारी प्रोविंशियल गवर्नमेंट्स ने बनाने थे. फेडरल गवर्नमेंट का तो सब्जेक्ट नहीं है. उस पर कुछ क्वारंटाइन स्टैंडर्ड्स हैं, उस पर कुछ रेगुलेशंस चाहिए थे, वो हमने पूरा ड्राफ्ट 2018 में मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ फूड एंड एग्रीकल्चर को प्रोवाइड कर दिया था. बट so the governance is a serious challenge, but that could only be resolved if a government is there in the office and they know for 5 years we are going to stay, और कोई हमारे खिलाफ धरना नहीं हो रहा होगा, कोई हमारे खिलाफ जो है उनको एक बिल्कुल क्लियर पाथ मिले कि जी इन 5 सालों में अगर आप डिलीवर नहीं करेंगे, आपको इलेक्शन में पब्लिक विल सेटल द स्कोर. ठीक है. बट एंड आई नो फ्रॉम द, आई मीन, मैं आपको यकीन दिला रहा हूं कि ये हो नहीं सकता कि जो पॉलिटिकल गवर्नमेंट ऑफिस जिसने एज्यूम किया हुआ है वो एफर्ट ना करे कि मैं डिलीवर ना करूं, बिकॉज उनके सामने एक ही की एजेंडा होता है कोई भी काम करते हुए, हाउ इट विल इंपैक्ट द वोटिंग इन द नेक्स्ट इलेक्शन. दैट्स द ओनली की. अगर ऑल द, आई मीन, इंटरवेंशंस आर डिजाइंड, ठीक है, उसमें बहुत सारी चीजों में लॉन्ग टर्म आपकी थॉट प्रोसेस भी होता है, बट जनरली इट इज द पॉलिटिशियन ऑलवेज थिंक्स अबाउट कि जी इलेक्शन पे इसका क्या इंपैक्ट आएगा. तो इफ दिस इज द केस, आई मीन, दे विल परफॉर्म, बट हु इज स्टॉपिंग देम टू परफॉर्म? दिस इज अ क्वेश्चन टू पॉन्डर अबाउट and then fix this in the country. So now coming back to the capital markets, very deliberately we have had this plan, Khalid Sahab will bear it out, कि 20% जो हमारा एक लोकल पार्टनर होगा एनर्जी प्रोजेक्ट्स में. ठीक है. कुछ प्रोजेक्ट्स तो प्योरली जो हमें था कि 8000 मेगावाट का शॉर्टफॉल था, हमें फौरी किल करना था, और हमसे पहले पीपल पार्टी की गवर्नमेंट ने एक सिंगल PC1 भी डेवलप नहीं किया था. मुल्क में पता था 8000 मेगावाट की शॉर्टफॉल है. 5 साल ऑफिस में रहे, बट देयर वाज नॉट इवन अ सिंगल, आई मीन, इनिशिएटिव जिससे पता चल रहा हो कि मुल्क में आप अपनी एनर्जी सिक्योरिटी को मेंटेन करने जा रहे हैं. So the problem was in 2013, as minister highlighted, कि एक एक्सप्लोडिंग बॉम्ब था पाकिस्तान. ठीक है. और उस वक्त 8000 मेगावाट लाने के लिए तो हमने चाइना को कहा कि जी ठीक है, जो भी अरेंजमेंट होगा, बिकॉज दिस इज आवर नीड, वी वांट दिस मच एनर्जी एट एवरी कॉस्ट. बट फॉर रेस्ट ऑफ द प्रोजेक्ट्स वी मेड श्योर कि एक पाकिस्तान का लोकल पार्टनर हो. जैसे अभी आपका एंग्रो आया, आपका थलनोवा में ये जो तबा एंड अदर फैमिलीज, बट इवेंचुअली इन्हीं बड़े जो ग्रुप्स हैं हमारे, उन्होंने ही उसमें इन्वॉल्व होना था. एंड देन दे वर सपोज टू हैव इक्विटी फ्रॉम पाकिस्तानी साइड, सर्टेन इक्विटी, और बाकी का लोन अरेंजमेंट था चाइना के साथ. तो दैट वाज बेसिकली, जब आप इक्विटी को इस तरह से नर्चर कर रहे होते हैं, इट इज, अब लेटर ऑन अगली स्टेजेस में क्या कर सकते थे कि आप इन्हीं पावर हाउसेस की ला के आप स्टॉक मार्केट पे लिस्टिंग कराएं, उनके शेयर्स फ्लोट करें, आम आदमी को, सिटीजन को, किसी यूरोपियन को, किसी अमेरिकन को ये पॉसिबिलिटी हो कि वो शेयर्स खरीदे. एंड वंस वी विल बी डूइंग दिस, वी आर इंक्रीजिंग देयर स्टेक इन पाकिस्तान इकोनॉमी. ठीक है. और एंड यू आर गोइंग टू हैव वेरी इजीली, आई मीन, जो अभी डॉलर्स की शॉर्टेज है वो आप उसको मैनेज कर सकते हैं. बट ये करने का व्हाट वाज द राइट टाइम इन द कंट्री? द राइट टाइम वाज जस्ट आफ्टर 2018, जब ये 12-13 हजार मेगावाट सिस्टम पे आ गया था, 6% की ग्रोथ इकोनॉमी दे रही थी. ठीक है. तो उस जमाने में, एज मिनिस्टर वाज टेलिंग, एंड आई वॉच फॉर दैट, कि देयर वाज नॉट इवन अ सिंगल एम्बेसी इन इस्लामाबाद व्हिच वाज नॉट बीटिंग द प्लानिंग कमीशंस डोर, एंड दे वांट टाइम फ्रॉम अस. एंड व्हाट दे वांट, how we can get involved in CPEC.
So,
That was the time. अच्छा, अब मैं बस 1 मिनट लूंगा. But that part was ignored. अब आप मुझे बताएं कि जब मुल्क में आपके ट्विन डेफिसिट, हर रोज आपका हुकूमत के भी लोग और अपोजिशन के लोग भी डिफॉल्ट की बातें कर रहे हो शाम को टीवी प्रोग्राम पे बैठ के, और आप मुझे कहें कि मैं कैपिटल मार्केट को डेवलप करने में गवर्नमेंट क्या रोल प्ले कर रही है, तो इट्स नॉट गोना हैपन. सो आई मीन हर चीज का एक अप्रोप्रिएट टाइम है. वी मिस दैट बोट एट दैट टाइम. सो नाउ होपफुली आई मीन इंशाल्लाह things will get better, and there would be a time, I mean, and this is quite possible. What you have said, this is quite possible, and that is the way, and we are quite cognizant of this. बहुत सारी planning इसमें जो हुई थी, वो सारी disrupt हुई once again, क्योंकि पीछे कोई काम नहीं.
So I think each one of the speaker इनके साथ एक session हो सकता है. By the way, Dr. Naveed, इसीलिए at that time 45% of shares were acquired by Shanghai Stock Exchange in Pakistan. Pakistan Stock Exchange 45%. So there was a transition happening, but unfortunately.
और वो भी हम स्टेप उस वक्त ले जाते अगर इतना नेगेटिव प्रोपेगेंडा मीडिया में ना हो रहा होता. क्योंकि हमें तो देखे ना, हमारे अपने थिंक टैंक्स इस्लामाबाद में, they were having these seminars and conferences के डेट ट्रैप में आ रहा है, पाकिस्तान डेट ट्रैप में आ रहा है.
So with, sir, I've been asked by the...
We can have this discussion later on.
I will invite Dr. Nadeem again for a bigger session and all. Sir, Ambassador Saab, just succinctly, sir, if you could just conclude. Yes.
Thank you very much. I think it has been a very useful discussion. Our time itna nahi hai कि one could go on and on. So, one-liner, two-liners. First of all, make up for the lost time. Lessons learned. What are the lessons learned from CPEC? Where have we gone wrong? What are the lapses? What are the loopholes? Usko hame focus karna chahiye. So make up for the lost time. Secondly, I think notionally CPEC is to be completed by 2030. But given the fact that we have lost about 3-4 years plus COVID, we might seek an extension if we need more investments from China. Secondly, we need to prioritize areas, prioritize projects in these clusters which we have agreed with the Chinese side. For example, agriculture. I know there was a proposal, I don't know whether it's still there or not. There was a proposal that in agriculture we will develop agriculture demonstration zone, number one. Number two, we will induce Arab capital, Chinese technology and Pakistani labor and the land for some kind of corporate farming or whatever, which can be, because China needs, China imports quite a bit of food items, and there Pakistan can transform its agriculture. Similarly, mineral development, as a lady mentioned, we don't have, it's a very capital intensive industry. If the Chinese are interested in metals and minerals, which we have, I think, in abundance in Balochistan and elsewhere, I think we can lure in Chinese companies. Relocation of surplus industrial capacity. This has been going on, but because our SEZs were not operational optimally, so this could not happen. But I think this is ये चीज़ जो है ये हमारे हाथ से निकल जाएगी अगर हमने SEZs को डेवलप नहीं किया. और इसके साथ ही SEZs डेवलप करते हैं या मैन्युफैक्चरिंग यूनिट्स लगते हैं, एक्सपोर्ट्स ओरिएंटेड इंडस्ट्री लगती है, आपका टेक्नोलॉजी आएगी, आपकी एक्सपर्टीज बढ़ेगी, लोकल एम्प्लॉयमेंट जो है वो बढ़ेगी और ह्यूमन रिसोर्स कैपेसिटी आपकी बढ़ेगी, स्किल सेट आपका बढ़ेगा. Domestically, we have to empower SMEs because this is going to be a business-to-business kind of thing. Of course, governance की आप बात कर रहे हैं वो तो एक बहुत बड़ा issue है, उसके बड़ा कुछ लिखा जाए. Streamline our procedures for the investors. There are still, I think, 21-22 tiers through which an investor, a company like his, have to go. So I hope कि ये जो facilitation council बनी है इस चीज़ पे खास तौर पे focus करेगी. किसी के पास टाइम नहीं होता कि वो बैठ के यहाँ दफ्तरों के चक्कर लगाए, वो भी अगर फॉरेन बिजनेसमैन हो तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट चीज़ है. दूसरी एक चीज़ जो बिल्कुल इस डिस्कशन में नहीं आई, मैं सिर्फ फ्लैग करना चाहता हूँ. वी हैव अबाउट 24 सिस्टर सिटी एंड सिस्टर प्रोविंसेस लिंकेजेस, एंड चाइना ने अपने प्रोविंसेस को कहा हुआ है, अपने रीजन्स को कहा हुआ है गो ग्लोबल, एंड दे आर फॉर्मिंग लिंकेजेस इन बिजनेस, एजुकेशन, इंडस्ट्री एट्सेट्रा, डिपेंडिंग ऑन व्हाट स्ट्रेंथ दे हैव विद द काउंटर पार्ट्स. हमारे ये जो ये हमने मैकेनिज्म बना दिया था, अभी भी मतलब फ्रेमवर्क है, सिस्टर सिटीज़ हैं, सिस्टर प्रोविंसेस हैं, दे आर डॉर्मेंट, और ये इंटर प्रोविंशियल कोऑर्डिनेशन मिनिस्ट्री करती है जी सारा। उनसे कभी कोई पूछे कभी आप क्या कर रहे हैं इसके ऊपर, बट दिस इज ए व्हीकल वेयर यू कैन इंड्यूस प्रोविंस टू प्रोविंस रिलेशनशिप एंड गेट बेनिफिट्स। तो इसके ऊपर कोई काम पाकिस्तान में नहीं हो रहा। दूसरा, हमारा कोई 30,000 के करीब स्टूडेंट्स हैं, पाकिस्तानी स्टूडेंट्स। आई होप HEC incorporates them into their planning data and helps planning commission to sort of get their talent. वो 3-3, 4-4 साल वहाँ रहते हैं, PhDs कर रहे हैं, सब कुछ कर रहे हैं, उनको एक चाइनीज़ कल्चर का भी पता लग जाता है, लैंग्वेज का पता, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ कोई ऐसा सिस्टम नहीं है कि हम एक पायलट प्रोजेक्ट शुरू कर दें कि उनको यहाँ लाए, बल्कि चाइनीज़ कंपनीज आर सेंडिंग देम अब्रॉड फॉर देयर ओवरसीज प्रोजेक्ट्स। दिस इज consortium universities, Daud Sahib has just mentioned. It's another vehicle for us to exploit in our favor. Baki ji, broad point hai, linkage between academia and industry. I think that is what we need to do a lot of work. Are we serious? Are we really working? वो ऐसे इकबाल साहब का मैं कोट पढ़ रहा था, उर्दू में इसलिए कह रहा हूँ। उन्होंने कहा जी कि जो, सॉरी टू से दिस, मैं कभी कभी सोचता हूँ तो अफसोस होता है, लेकिन मैं कहना चाहता हूँ ये कि जो कौम 10 बजे सुबह उठे वो कहीं नहीं पहुंच सकती। प्लीज चेंज दीज हैबिट्स। थैंक यू।
So thank you very much. Again, a round of applause for the speakers, but more importantly for yourself for being here and listening to us. I would now request Rector Sahab and DG NIMA sir for the souvenir distribution here.
Mr. Dr. Hassan Daud Bhatt.
Just to share that the namaz for Jummah is now at 2:30. So after the souvenir exchange, we'll go for the refreshment and then for the prayers.
Mr. Wang from Energy China Limited. Dr. Nadeem, the Chief Economist of Pakistan. Sajid Aslam. Commodore Babar Bilal. So with this we conclude this session. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Great work. Work hard and let's build CPEC. Thank you all.